Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 7, Hippias Minor, 364e to 365b. In some prepared material, Hippias makes a distinction between three Homeric heroes, and Socrates says he didn't understand the distinction in the exhibition. And now Hippias has made the distinction even simpler, even clearer, and even so, Socrates doesn't understand. He does understand, he says, why Hippias said that Homer made Achilles Aristos. He doesn't say why he understands that, but it's true. Homer did make Achilles Aristos, most manly. He also says that he understands why Hippias says that Homer made Nestor the most sophos. We find this problematic, but apparently this is clear for Socrates. So we're down to Odysseus. Odysseus is the problem. Apparently Socrates doesn't understand why anyone would say that Odysseus is the most polytropos, despite the fact that it's in the first line of the Odyssey. Notice that this isn't a philosophical concept where you could argue that perhaps Socrates really doesn't understand because he's really stupid. This is Homer. Everyone knows that Odysseus is polytropos. It's the first line, as I say, it's the first line of the Odyssey. There's no way anyone could not know this. Plato has helped us see that it's part of the character of Socrates in this dialogue that he lies. He says that he doesn't know. He clearly does know. He must know. There's no Greek who wouldn't know that. And to rub it in, Socrates is made to say, to tell you the truth, I don't know at all what you're saying. This is really rubbing it in because not only is he lying, but he's saying that he's telling the truth. And we have to accept the fact that when Socrates says that he is speaking the truth, he could actually be lying. This is a very important point which most philosophers who treat the dialogues cannot accept. For some reason, they seem to think that a philosopher can never lie, especially when they claim to be telling the truth. Perhaps, they would say, perhaps someone isn't telling the truth if he's making a mistake, but no philosopher would intentionally lie. But we see here that this is not the case. Socrates is intentionally lying. I'm rubbing this in because this is an important point to make. We should look at what is going on in the dialogue and not make assumptions about what philosophers do or don't do. Socrates in various dialogues claims that he doesn't know something absolutely. And if you collect all of these places where he claims complete ignorance of something, you collect various fields in which Socrates claims to have had ignorance, and the sum total is that Socrates appears to have absolutely no knowledge whatsoever of anything. He's a complete Burke who knows nothing. And then you can claim, because you take this seriously, and everything else is ironic, but this is serious, Socrates is the model of the wise man in that he acknowledges his ignorance. And this is the main position of the skeptical school. Skeptical Platonists from the 3rd to the 1st century BC were called academics, while dogmatic Platonists were called Platoniki, or we would call them Platonists. On a side note, the first philosopher, so far as I can tell, who claimed that a wise man should never, ever lie was Augustine, who is about 650 years after Plato. It's anachronistic to impose on early Greek philosophers the notion that lying is a bad thing in itself. Lying is a means to an end. We'll see more about lying in the dialogue, so that can wait for now. Let's get back to Socrates' problem. Why does he think Odysseus isn't the most polytropos in Homer? So this is what he says. Kai moi epe, anti entende malon matho, ho Achilles u polytropos to Homero pepoetai, and tell me, so I may understand more. Achilles hasn't been made by Homer polytropos. The negative is actually before polytropos, so literally the question is, Achilles has been made by Homer not polytropos? The question is absurd, but it's also manipulative. Hippias has to respond to this question. And because the competition they have set up requires Hippias to beat Socrates, he will have to say that Hippias isn't polytropos. Homer has not made Achilles polytropos, which should be an easy thing to say because he isn't. The only polytropos is Odysseus. But Socrates knows that Hippias will be creative and brilliant in his way and will explain how Achilles is the very opposite of polytropos. Before we go on to Hippias's response, we should see what Socrates has actually achieved by this question. He has transferred the epithet of Odysseus to Achilles, which will make Hippias respond by showing that Achilles is the very opposite of that in relation to Odysseus. Who has dropped out? Nestor. Socrates had said earlier that he understands why Nestor is the most sophos. He understands why Achilles is Aristos. And the only problem is Odysseus, why Odysseus is polytropos. But now we see that the question actually gets rid of Nestor. We're back to Achilles and Odysseus, the two people that Socrates was interested in the first place. This is a very clever manipulation of Hippias. So Hippias says, Heikistageo Socrates al haplustatos kai elethestatos epekai en litais, hinika prosalelus poie autus dialegomenus, lege auto ho Achilles proston Odyssea. Socrates asked, didn't Homer make Achilles polytropos? Far from it, Socrates, but most simple and most true, since in the Litai, this is the section in the Iliad where Agamemnon had sent Odysseus and a few others to Achilles to beg him to come back into the fight, giving him lots of presents and beseeching him, which is the idea of Litai. Long poems like the Iliad and the Odyssey were broken up into sections which had names, which made it easier for people to ask a rhapsode to perform for them a particular section. In the Litai, where he makes them talking to each other. He is Homer, and he makes, the verb used is poie, which is the same root as poietes, from which we get poet, the producer. A poem is the production. So he's saying that Homer produces Achilles and Odysseus talking. So Homer makes Achilles most simple and most true, since in the Litai, when he produces Odysseus and Achilles talking to each other, Homer's Achilles says to Odysseus, and then we get a quote from Homer, from this very passage in the Iliad, and we have to understand that Hippias is quoting from memory. This is very impressive. Declamation in the oral tradition had a sing-song quality to it. For example, Diogenes laertiade polymechan Odysseus, but I'm not going to do that. I'll just read it in meter, but without the sing-song element. Diogenes laertiade polymechan Odysseus, chremen deton mython pelegeos apoepen, hos perde craneo tekai hos teleestai oio, echthros garmoi kenos homos aidao pulesin, hos heteron men cuthe enifresin allo de epe, autaregon ereo hos kai tetelesmenon estai. O divine son of Laertes, much scheming Odysseus, it is necessary to say bluntly, basically what's on my mind, as I accomplish what I intend to accomplish. For hostile to me is that man like the gates of Hades, the man who has one thing in his chest and says another thing, but I will say as it will be accomplished. In other words, Achilles says he's honest and he hates someone dishonest. Notice that this is just like Socrates, who said that he really, really doesn't understand something. He's honest, he's saying the truth. And here's Achilles saying also that he is honest. But what does this have to do with him not being polytropos? Hippias explains, En tutois deiloitois episin, ton tropon hekateru tu andros, hos homen Achilles eialethes tekai haplus, hode Odysseus polytropos tekai pseudes. For in these words, he, Homer, shows the character of each hero, that Achilles is true and simple, but Odysseus is polytropos and false. We'll discuss all of this in depth next time, but let's finish what Hippias says now. Poiegarton Achillea eston Odyssea legon tatautata epe. For Homer makes Achilles speaking to Odysseus these words. So Achilles is honest and true because he says he is, and Odysseus is false and polytropos because Achilles is talking to him, and he hates the man who is false.